Hello, it's Neil Romanek from AU, and today we're going to be talking to Ecoflow, and we're going to find out what Ecoflow is, who they are, and who's been working on Ecoflow. Ecoflow is not so much a they; it's a project that's been going on for quite a few years, starting as an IBC accelerator, and has a really interesting story, and is trying to solve some really, really important problems that we have to get right if we're going to have a sustainable media industry and use energy in a smart way in making content. So, hello, guys. Francois, Ian, Hemini.
Hello.
Hi there.
Great to see you.
Hello.
And we'll just jump right in. Okay, so who wants to start and tell us what EcoFlow is?
Well, Francois is one of the real founders. I came on board a little later, so Francois.
And great. And also, Francois, go ahead and maybe tell us about your background too, and kind of how you what you've been doing before and how you got into EcoFlow, or how it
Okay,
became launch.
of course, I'm François Polarzik. I'm the sustainability director at Exilo. I've been with the company for about 10 years. For the ones who don't know us, we're a video solution provider. So we work with small and large media organizations, operators across the world, delivering video experiences. I've essentially got into sustainability a little bit by accident, right? Just after my paternity leave, trying to focus on something that was a bit more meaningful. And right after COVID, you could see a lot of operators, media orgs starting to set up net zero targets, sort of like sustainability reports, and a lot of our customers were also asking for that, right? So started to look into this, and then one thing led to another. I started working on both partnership and sustainability, which actually made a lot of sense at the time because everything we do in sustainability, like this project, is a lot about partnerships. One thing led to another. We started working on the idea of EcoFlow for the accelerator program. So IBC has been a very important lever for us to get started. I'm sure you already had organizations like Green Eco Streamings and the Impact that were both looking at different things. But I think the key differentiator for us was to be very close to the businesses and their own challenges. And that's actually the core philosophy of an accelerator, is to look at a challenge coming from any organization. It's not about a vendor coming and say, hey, I've got this product to sell or this new solution to show you. So it was Humans Not Robots, Kristen, myself, and the BBC and ITV pitching back in 2024, and basically trying to get as many people with us. So the Impact were part of this, Winning Streaming were part of this. We also had RTL Netherlands, Quantic, Big Movie in the Front Offer Institute. So it's quite a good pedigree of people all really keen to work on something meaningful. And the sort of like the idea around starting EcoFlow initially was, let's do as much as possible in those 3-4 months in a hackathon style to try and solve this problem of sustainability in streaming, which was obviously kind of mission impossible in 3-4 months. But let's say, okay, well, what if we were a team within the BBC or ITV or RTL, and what could we achieve, right? So we looked at low-hanging fruits and user devices, which led us to create the EcoFlow app, sustainability demo app packed with sustainability features, some novel features like audio only, which you really haven't seen on smart TVs, for instance, or reducing the luminance of certain backgrounds and so on, and doing a bunch of tests to see what could make sense, and also get feedback from the organization whether this could be implemented in the real world or not. And also trying to get a better view of the, in general, energy consumption and carbon emission of the streaming supply chain. So that was a really good baseline. And we came back for round two initially, essentially, with EcoFlow 2, as we called it, and looking at more the rest of the supply chain.
That was the following year, right?
That was the following year, exactly, which led us then fast forward to today with Ecoflow X.
So then what was I mean, we're talking about that goal as being like, okay, let's try to make the video delivery chain more sustainable. And which kind of like from a distance sort of makes sense. And I guess it's like as you kind of get closer and closer to that, you begin to actually see all the parts that you didn't see from a distance. So how did how did you start to kind of take bites off that elephant? You know, how did you start to like go, okay, we're going to focus on that rather than that, and what's important? And also maybe what did you find when you started looking at it? Because that there's so many parts of the supply chain we kind of take for granted that you don't really think about, oh, that's right, this has to get here and that, before you actually start understanding what you're dealing with.
Well, in that first year, and of course I came on board just after that as a champion through the fact that I represent the Institution of Engineering Technology, which is a very large professional engineering institution with over 160,000 members, and we are obviously also one of the owners of IBC. But we have this thing where we became a champion of some of the projects, and 2024 is when we saw the Kickstarter and we got on board then. But what is very interesting is that I've been involved in the technical evaluation of energy consumption there, of a variety of things, because of a lot of questions raised around what was my main focus point back then, which was around ultra HD technologies and HDR and such like. But the vision we had then, prior to my getting on board with Ecoflow, was that we needed to make sure that whatever numbers we used were very, very right and correct, and there was no covering up or obscuring of the reality of what those numbers are, and that those numbers are honest and straightforward and transparent and valid, because there's a lot of noise in the system. But in that first year, I think we all discovered very clearly that the gathering of energy consumption data from all aspects of the entire end-to-end flow was very difficult. So Francois made reference to the low-hanging fruit of the consumer devices. We soon realized that we needed to focus there, because that's where we'd started with the aim of getting an application that took on board sustainability features and impactful technologies to have real-world impact for and demonstrate real-world impact that people could then actually take on board themselves in their own applications. But effectively, we also identified there was all this black box, basically, which at best was a grey box only in places, of all the other aspects of the whole workflow, which we had to basically balk at chewing down on and move that to a later phase. And I think that has continued through the second year, and now in our third year in effect, but now as an IBC partner, and now as a project that is working with participants to actually focus on the key areas where we could help people who are providing content and streaming with their ability to manage what they can do with that, reducing their energy consumption.
So it sounds like it's that kind of sort of you're unearthing a dinosaur fossil and you've got a head and some ribs, and then you realize I don't even have no idea what the tail isn't there. I guess it probably has a tail, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. And it was, it may have looked like it was only a 1 meter tall dinosaur when we first started, but it's basically a full on Diplodocus. That's 100 meters long.
The tail just keeps going and going.
Yeah, exactly.
How many? So you're coming in from the EBU, but you also you've been involved in greening of streaming as well. So I'd also be interested to kind of get some of the greening of streaming story and how it intersects and doesn't intersect with Ecoflow, because greening of streaming is an organization that was working to solve these problems in a way, like, okay, where's the energy consumption in streaming, and had kind of sort of set themselves the task to do this. And then we're partners with Ecoflow for that first year or so. But maybe can you talk about and the EBU and kind of how these different organizations are interacting and collaborating?
Yep. So hi, I'm Hemini Mehta, and I'm the Senior Sustainability Lead at the EBU. And similarly, I've been part of the project as long as Ian has. So I started in Ecoflow 1, 2, and now X. And the reason for being part of that, having the EBU there, is really important, because as sustainability matures, we all know that the technology side, the digital streaming side, is becoming more and more important for our members and content providers. And so some of the members have started to look at it. Others would love to take a look at it, but want answers because they're not as big and they don't have as many people in their departments to do day-to-day operations, as well as trying to figure out this huge puzzle, which all of us have been trying to do, I would say, for at least 4 years, and we have, we're still trying. So, so the idea was that if we can get organizations, so prior to Ecoflow becoming an accelerator project, we had already started working with Greening of Streaming, that had started to look at this idea of trying to understand the energy usage across our digital media streaming chain. Then you have your various complexities, as you already know, about all these different parts of the chain that are involved, or working slightly different. And as it matures, you get new parts of the chain and new organizations coming in doing new things. And now, what does that mean to it? And the reality is that we never got a baseline chain at the beginning.
Mm.
And I think we're still trying to figure that out. So, worked with greening of streaming very quickly, similar to at the time of Ecoflow 1, we found out that studies had been done, and we know that majority of the energy usage was in the home. So it became a good idea to start focusing on, rather than looking at the whole home, focus at what's going on, sorry, on the whole chain, look at what's going on in the home. But even then, you have all your various complexities, right? You have sizes, different makes, different models, different technologies. Year on year, new televisions are coming in. Which ones should we be testing? Which ones shouldn't be testing? What about the boxes? What about not the boxes, etc., etc. So it's really difficult to do on your own. So the only way we can is by collaborating together and working in this sort of a consortium or associations, and trying to understand parts of the chain. And I don't think we haven't got there. And I think because the chain is so big and so fragmented, everybody's slightly focusing on different areas because it's important. So it's important for us to kind of be there as EBU on behalf of public service media and broadcasters to try and help them along this. And the only way we can do that is by going and being part of different associations, collaborating with various associations, and so that we can get something more meaningful out of it. And then how can we actually use that to our advantage? So, for example, we know for Ecoflow 1 that if the home has this much energy that's being spent, why the idea of lowering your temperature at home by one degree allows you to save lots of money and doesn't change your environment or that much, and so you can cope with that. Why can't we do something similar on the energy consumption at home when watching television, i.e. making it have that same standard set out, saying, well, if you watch it in ambient lighting, you can save this amount of money, the same amount of money that you would get by lowering your home temperature by one degree. So that's what we're trying to do, is like be part of that, to try and help engage people and engage them to make sure that they can find ways to do the right thing, but also that advantage.
So is that, are you engaging with, because shows like IBC and the kind of, you think of the video delivery workflow sort of stops at the home, kind of. And so are you working with, or have you been talking with the device manufacturers, or is there a partnership with CES or something as well, or those kinds of consumer electronics entities or that side of the business?
Do you want me to say that, Hemini? Yeah,
because I know you obviously have done a lot of work with the devices.
I'm very much, and of course that first year we did a lot of work focused on the devices in the home, and we obviously outreach to all the different parties involved, talking with people about bringing their expertise involved. And we worked with Greening and Streaming very extensively then, because they were bringing up to speed their own solution for measuring energy usage in the home, and we worked with Fraunhofer in a much more focused way as well, in looking at basically collecting together a lot of measurements of what was happening in the home. And it was from that time we realized that actually getting the numbers isn't our forte, getting the tools was. And we continue, and we looked at all the different organizations involved in the entire end-to-end chain, and we identified that there was a need for a group focused on the tooling towards broadcasters to allow them to have their own control about how they can influence the energy consumption. And from that perspective, therefore, we see ourselves as being slightly overlapping with lots of organizations, not just greening and streaming to an extent, but we recognize that there's no point to be overlapping. Those are areas where we can collaborate, where it makes sense, but it's also areas where we should ensure that maybe better organizations can focus on those areas. So from that perspective, greening and streaming is very focused on the measurement of specific components to get numbers that can then be used to evaluate things going forward. But from our perspective, we said, okay, given the understanding of the behavior that we collect from our own work, from the work with greening and streaming, and for anyone else, including Impact, then we take that behavioral knowledge and we want to do some different with that knowledge of the behavior. And that's why in Ecoflow 2, we focused on a digital twin, because that would enshrine the behavior along with whatever pull-ins of real world data we can bring in from actual full end-to-end solutions to actually create a perspective of the overall workflow, and also look at scenarios of different impactful technologies and what the impact is on energy consumption of those. So we took a very much a different slice through the same thing and already started to work towards, okay, what can people actually do to reduce energy based on pulling together what we can see and understand about the overall attack surface of sustainability and streaming. And from that perspective, working with green streaming has been natural, very natural. We continue, I believe, to have a good working relationship with them. And we are very supportive of their continuing work of taking that measurement of actual specific instances forward. And we hope that when we see public data coming from that, we can include aspects of that in our own model, our own digital twin. But of course, we're also working with other bodies, the operators, about their energy usage and trying to bring that into the overall end-to-end digital twin as well, because we see a need to actually have a clarity about the entire behavior of the whole end-to-end workflow from a pure energy perspective. And then from that, identify things that can be improved or modified or changed to reduce energy consumption, and that requires full understanding of what that behavior means and what those numbers are. And that's why a digital twin is an excellent place to start, particularly because of the challenges we get in any data at all from anybody. And getting data is the problem that everyone has, whether it's actually greening and streaming, where they need access to get measurements of energy consumption from the individual platform components, through to our own working with cloud providers who are restricted in what they can share for many reasons, not just commercial reasons. They can also just have general confidentiality issues around competitiveness, both between themselves and other cloud operators and also between different operators. So that has informed our approach now in Ecoflow X, where we're very much more focused on the model, not the data. The data is something that the operator brings with them, and we can help work with them and the other organizations to identify how they can measure those pieces and introduce them into the model. And then for us to use that model to produce outputs that can then lead to recommendations through whatever processing we can provide, whether it's AI or otherwise, to actually allow operators to actually make key decisions about how they can save energy.
Right. So Ecoflow X, we didn't really talk kind of about that graduation to Ecoflow X, I guess. So what is Ecoflow X and how is it different from the IBC project? Because Ecoflow X is become airborne, right? It's like it's now off on its own, separate from the IBC accelerators. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. And that's very much, that we are beyond what a normal accelerator is. And we can be very honest right now, we don't know quite what we're going to be. We are working with our contributors, our participants, to identify just what Ecoflow X is going forward. We recognize the things we have identified to work on, and they're really clear to us in terms of the model, the digital twin, that is, the the reporting and use of methodologies that can be standardized and clear, and also the processing to evaluate and come up with impactful approaches to how operators can save energy. So that's very clear, and that effectively we put the X on the end as well because of that. We wanted to show that we are slightly different. We are not just a year at a time project. We are something else. Also, Ecoflow X is a lot easier to search for because Ecoflow is the brand of a particular set of products. But we wanted to signify that we are in the process of identifying a way forward for what we are. And at the moment, that's very much participants. I know people have raised questions about, this party is no longer involved, this party is now involved. At the end of the day, everyone has been involved. Everyone continues to be involved.
Like greening of streaming, for example, people are kind of like it was.
Yeah. And, we talk and, progress those conversations because at the end of the day, I think the whole system is very large. The whole attack surface is very large. There are a lot of different organizations involved in that. And I think we all have a very clear role of doing our bit to actually improve energy usage and to make streaming platforms more sustainable. I think we all do it in slightly different ways. And I think we're very clear as well that we want to make sure we don't overlap, except where collaboration is from our different expertise levels and participants makes sense.
So, and maybe Francois, you can get into this a bit. So what is it that so as a broadcaster, and I guess we're talking about different sort of content delivery organization. You've got kind of streamers, big streamers, and broadcasters, and maybe production companies, or small scale podcast studio. I don't know if that kind of encompasses the umbrella that you're working with. But how much can I really do as a broadcaster to really make an impact, so, especially given that I may be working with data centers who are kind of doing their own thing and I'm a bit at the mercy of possibly. And then of course we're talking about the consumer devices and stuff, in that the stuff that I have control over as a broadcaster. What is your sense of like how much I can really make a big impact globally? And I guess, and what kind of impacts, power consumption, carbon consumption. I mean, if I'm in Poland, if I'm a broadcaster, I'm automatically gonna have a much dirtier grid than if I'm in France, for example, or Iceland.
Well, I guess the answer is that it really depends from which lens you're looking at it, right? From an Ecoflow perspective, we're looking at different type of personas. Over the last few years, actually, in the types of reports and results we're putting forward, we're always trying to answer this question from whether you look at it from a head of platform or head of product perspective, a financial perspective, a sustainability director or a head of sustainability perspective, because these will have different answers, right? So one of the main key findings from the workshop we've done early in February, that is now available on the ABC website and soon on our website, is that sustainability is not something that you necessarily push forward as a standalone, right? It's becoming, you see probably a lot of LinkedIn posts around that. I see one this morning, that we're trying to merge as much as possible these responsibilities around sustainability within each department and each functions and each persona, right? And the idea is not to just shift the responsibility away, but everyone becomes also accountable. And how do you get a team that's working on the platform with releases every week and with a lot of different things they have to worry about, like efficiency and like the costs and the performance and the security and the risk mitigation? Well, it's by looking at these very specific business challenges, right? So the whole sort of like philosophy of Ecoflow, like I mentioned earlier, is that we are focusing on these business challenges first. And a good example of that, for instance, is sustainability features in a streaming app, right? There's a various different level or degree or places of responsibility for such features. A company like Netflix or Paramount or Disney will not be responsible for the emissions that are occurring on the end user devices. They can influence them. Just like you have a washing machine and you're making pods for the washing machine, you might influence the consumption of that washing machine by getting more efficient pods potentially, but you're not responsible in the home of those of that energy consumption or these emissions, right? So it's a bit similar, and it's a bit ironic in a way, and paradoxal, that we're trying to push for these energy saving features on the devices, whilst the companies we're working with are not directly responsible from a greenhouse gas inventory and responsibility perspective. But looking at this year, for instance, where you have agentic AI and you can get maybe potential more data, what if we could look at these sustainability features and what if they could improve user engagement? What if they could improve performance by reducing some of some features that are very taxing on the memory of the CPU of the devices, and then therefore will also improve the user experience and then reduce energy consumption, right? So it's looking at the problem from a different lens and looking at the problem from those business challenges and whether it has an impact on energy consumption and or carbon emission, right? So I think this is the way forward. There's still a lot to do. So a lot of things that we are doing through Ecoflow X in those short 3-4 months that we have before we launch into even something bigger is saying, okay, well, as you asked today, what can you do today? We're looking at taxonomies, we're looking at a sustainability framework for observability. These are the kind of work that we do. We're improving the digital twin model that we started last year, because all of these are tools to help you get started very, very, very quickly. Measurement for us is a mean to an end. It's not the finality, right? It's just an extra tool that we have under our belts to really work on those business challenges. I want by September and then later on to be able to go to these media organizations and say, hey, we're trying to solve this problem for you, this problem that you have with your risk management, with your efficiency, and eventually also energy consumption, right? Because that's what we're here for. But we're not going to knock on the door and say, hey, we're going to solve the energy problem for you. We want to solve your business challenges because this is the way it's going to work, right? We're not going to be able to say, be greener. It doesn't work anymore. Although it's hot outside, people are, periodically sometimes waking up again about this problem. But we have to think that we are in a capitalistic economy and that this is the way it works, and we want to solve, again, business challenges. We're getting closer, and we're going to provide a lot of ideas and tools by September that will give some snapshots into how this could become. And then, post-September, we want to continue working closely with this organization and to embed these processes that we have around measuring things, around taking actions, leveraging agentic AI, so those agents can scan data and make better decisions for you, and looking at user engagement and performance and all of these things.
And so
go ahead, Emily.
And then all of that, having information can feed back into when you do procurement, because now you have much stronger understanding of your systems, the energy usage, and all these different lenses that Francois spoke about. We can then bring that information back in. And so when you are doing your procurement, that some of these information feeds how you do your procurement.
And there's also that, I guess maybe from a European point of view, and you might be able to speak to this, that it feels like the Ecoflow is a bit of a European project. I don't know. Do you have much engagement from the US or other countries or other regions? And also, how does that work with as we're saying, say different countries, different parts of the EU may have there's EU-wide position on things, but also each one of those countries may have their own individual practices. You may have vendors in one country doing things very differently from a vendor in another country. And how do you maybe start coordinating that and getting everybody on the same page? So it's not just the BBC working really hard and everybody else is kind of just doing its own thing.
It is a bit of a European involved group, but that's not by design. We don't exclude people. It very much is our participants are those people who receive the call to action and act, and we will engage anyone who wants to actually engage with us to actually work on producing ways of reducing energy usage that's in line with the needs of delivering a working full streaming platform of those sorts. And I think I would say that there is many people around the world, regardless of location, who are working on this. It's just when we actually, for example, when we had our workshop earlier in the year, there was a lot of learned experiences from that. And I think there was a lot of European perspectives there, but I think those were also worldwide perspectives, predominantly around the fact that sustainability is seen as something which takes second stage to other factors than in delivering a working platform that people need to sell. People need to have people use. And I think that's recognizing that and then acting upon that, where we need to move sustainability into being integrated in the way that people deliver engineering solutions, is the best way forward. And that's why we focus on, well, these are the cost benefits of doing these various aspects, as well as the energy reduction benefits. And thankfully, a lot of those do align quite a lot. But you've got to actually also begin at day one with sustainability in your mind. Otherwise, you will miss those ways forward of how to actually create both a sustainable streaming solution, as well as one that meets your commercial goals. And I think in our workshop, people recognize that they do need to have sustainability meet the commercial goals, as well as meet the energy reduction goals.
So are you running into or getting discussions around sort of the massive building of data centers and Gen AI and how that is affecting things? It's like people are trying to be doing their sustainability work, and then, people are building on the other side gigantic data centers and powering them with whatever they can find to power them with at the time.
Of course, we have that discussion, because that also comes down to something we identified from our previous 2 years, which we've taken forward now in this Ecoflow X, and that is that it's about good use of energy. And good use of energy is to meet the needs, something we need to have. A bad use of energy is where there is a usage of energy that doesn't provide benefits. And I don't think that's the business eye that we're looking at sustainability through, so that we identify that it's great that we're building these lovely data centers to meet things we absolutely need to have. But I think there does need to be a quantification of the benefits that is actually giving for that particular solution, and making sure that when those infrastructures are built, that they make best use of the best technology to mitigate the energy consumption that comes from that, including things like, and this has come from a report supported by the IET that came out in the beginning of last year, alongside some other organizations. I could possibly share some links to that, but essentially, look at your AI usage. Do you need to have everything driven by a single foundation model at large, meeting your goals of actually using AI effectively in your business? Or do you need to look at the use of smaller models, more locally placed, with clarity around their energy usage, better energy usage than say somewhere where you don't have clarity about the energy usage being used? And I think it's getting you to ask those questions about the fact that there are people out there who may be building data centers in the wrong places, in which case surely they want to maybe build them in the better places where energy that is sustainable is more freely available, or other resources are more freely available, where that area can actually support that data center. And I think that goes back to the original meaning of the word sustainable. It's like, if you build a data center, if it's consuming the resources in a particular location to the detriment of others in that location, then that's not sustainable. That really is the ultimate problem. So you do need to put some focus on making sure that we build things in the right places with the right functionality, and so that there is good usage of energy and not bad usage of energy, and bad usage of resources. I think that is also a clear point that came from our work, is that bad energy usage is wasteful energy use. And there's a lot of things in our technical solutions today where we have bad energy usage, where products are kept fully active to meet capacity demands, where really they should be looking at how to dynamically commission facilities or resources or infrastructure to meet the usage as necessary, and then work out how to make sure that they power those down when they're not being used. I think it was one of the insights we got from our modeling, is that you can talk about making energy savings, but they've got to be true energy savings. So just shifting energy usage away from a cloud platform your usage away from a cloud platform is not necessarily saving energy if that cloud platform is then just left on for use by other people to meet other demands. So that comes into a discussion of about consequential versus attributional energy measurement. And in fact, actually, that was also a key insight. Whether it's contributional or attributional is not the right question. I think it's whether the energy use is good or bad is much more the question.
Mm-hmm. But also people would say that building all the data centers is good because it's generating capital growth for now.
Yeah. Well,
ask me again in 9 months.
Then that's probably not the best thing. But if it's doing something that benefits our society and benefits what we do, then that can be termed good energy usage. If it's taking resources and building facilities in places where that's not where it's sustainable, then that's a bad energy usage. And I think that's what we've got to address is right from the beginning, right down to the initial decision about where you're going to place your facility to meet a demand for something. Make sure it's the right location. Make sure so that the sizing of that capacity is right for your usage and not just building excess capacity.
And I think time will tell as well. I mean, you're seeing the latest report from Microsoft and Google, their sustainability reports are just out. And then the numbers, this year, we're finally getting some meaningful numbers around energy consumption, mainly driven by the building of data centers or purchasing of compute from others in their scope 3. And per revenue, the emissions are doubling, tripling, quadrupling, right? So is it really a good business right now? You're also seeing companies like Meta actually purchasing compute so others don't have access to it, which is, crazy in the sense that you're buying things that you don't actually need. This is like the epitome of capitalism in a way we don't make use of that compute, but just for a pure competitiveness perspective. So we're walking on our heads a little bit at the moment. And I think whether there will be a bubble exploding soon or not, or whether, these emissions we manage to go down compared to the revenue, would be very interesting to see what will we do with all this increase of spending, essentially, both from a money perspective as well as emissions perspective.
So when we get sort of when it's all green energy all the time, when somebody later this month discovers cold fusion, and it's all green, what are I guess you could say, well, what's the point of sustainability? But also, like, what is it that in say what you're doing, Ecoflow, and getting these measurements and getting the understanding of the system, what applications do those have long term beyond like, okay, let's say our green energy problem is solved. What are the other benefits? And I assume there are benefits to being able to measure things and rearrange things in this way, in this more efficient way.
Maybe I can take this one quickly, but I just want to say, the energy problem and the climate change problem, climate impact problem is one of the 21 overall sustainable impacts, right? There's a lot more things around land usage and even the impact on societies and water usage. So it's not just on electricity. There's many, many more that you're looking at. And to build data centers and all the machines you need a lot of rare minerals. You need a lot of water to cool them down. So there's many more gases being released than just CO2. So there's much more than that. And going back to our sort of vision and mission at Ecoflow X, it's more about also solving real business challenges, right? To make the app working better and more efficient and with less cost as well, right? So all these things, again, looking at this from this first place is also quite interesting. And even though you would have access to unlimited energy, perhaps there could be some other efficiencies to be gained somewhere else. So you improve other aspects and not only these emissions, for instance, or the energy consumption.
But just to add to that, because I've thought through this idea, well, what happens if we had 100% sustainably green energy that had no, we could just use, if we had infinite energy? And the actual answer to that is energy usage is just one aspect of sustainability. We focus on it because we see it as one of the bigger ones right now, but it's just one. Everything right down to localized heating that can cause changes in our environment has impact. And it's about, and as Francois said, we utilize materials that are not necessarily recyclable, that are getting consumed. We do use materials that do get recycled and are not necessarily consumed. if you look at the whole picture. But that's what we need to look at and always try and make sure of, is we are trying to approach this a fully sustainable circular approach. And that also, it comes down to things like water. You hear a lot about the use of water. Well, actually, water doesn't get used up. It gets changed into a different form of water that we have to do something with. And that's really what people need to address, is that when you actually need water for cooling, there's ways of effectively and efficiently using it that you should think about. And where you do create grey water out of the back of a facility that actually needs to be processed back to being water you can actually use for even drinking, then you need to apply some engineering expertise to doing that. It is the fact that we've got to look at the whole perspective of what this cycle is of us doing things in this world, and make sure that we apply sustainable approaches where we can, and apply recycle approaches where we can, and apply good engineering solutions where we can, to ensure that we minimize our impact on the world, to make it so that actually that we can actually exceed the lifetime of the Earth rather than the other way around.
That there is no waste. There's no wastewater. It's just water that you have a responsibility to find a home for. There's no waste carbon dioxide. It's just you've manufactured carbon dioxide. What is you going to do with that now?
That's actually a good way of thinking about it. When you manufacture something, there's no waste. It's just you've created something you've got to think about what you do with. And of course, in the past, and even today, some people just pump it out. But actually, no, you've got to think about a good engineering solution to make that outcome of what you're doing be mitigated or removed in some way. And that's a very engineering perspective, of course. But it's what we're here for. It's what we're here to do, to make sure that we can make good use of the resources of the Earth in the minimum way possible, because ultimately we are using the resources of the Earth. Yeah, when we breathe, we're using, but we're not actually destroying it. We are converting it into something else.
Hemini, I just wanted, and maybe you can close this out here, but what is does the EBU itself have does the EBU have a plan for us?
I wish I could give you a plan and say just follow it, but well, we're working on a plan. Let's put it this way. This is the reason that we are part of Ecoflow X, that we are part of other associations like the ITU, like Greening of Streaming. Some members are part of DIMPACT, etc., where we're all trying to move towards the same goal, albeit different from different lenses and different areas. But the idea is that the information that we get out from here leads to an action plan, and that's where our key part of the EBU comes into play. We're a member organization where we can give good standards, where we provide dissemination of great resources, but also recommendations, best practices, etc. And that's the key that we want to give to our members. And yeah, everybody's wanting that holy grail. They all want like give us the answers. But as we know, the topic is very complex. As we've mentioned, there's a lot of participants and moving participants in the chain, depending on which country and you're part of. That has another different complexity added in. But where we can try and get information, we want to simplify it and then amplify it by saying, here's some great things. Why don't we take some of those initiatives? And it happens. Through some of our webinars, etc., we've heard some really great stories where it's inspired people to take action in their own organizations where things wouldn't have been thought about. So yeah, it's really important for us to spread the news and
and just to add to that, we are going to recognize that it may look to many people that there's all these different organizations. Well, actually, humanity is filled with lots of organizations, all of whom are contributing to making things work better for the world. And I think, Ecoflow is one tiny little group doing that. I think other organizations are involved, because at the end of the day, I think the other insight I always took away from this as well is that we do not have a direct impact on sustainability in energy usage. We have a direct impact in how we use it necessarily, but we don't have any impact on making sustainable energy. That's something else. That is the responsibility of people focused on energy generation, and those have a direct impact on sustainability. We're just trying to mitigate our usage of energy to the level that gives them a chance to actually have a 100% sustainable energy ecosystem. And that's what we're here for. And there are many, many other organizations who have their role in that. And we have to recognize that we are just one tiny little cog in a whole world of cogs.
And you have there's a publication or report that you have that's coming out?
Yes, it came out through the IBC. We have a report from a workshop where we asked many participants in the television and video streaming ecosystem back in the early first part of the year to actually say, what is the attack surface that we're working on? And there was a lot of outcomes from that, a lot of learnings from that. And it basically told us that we're slightly moving the needle, but we're not moving it enough. And we have compiled all those thoughts into a lovely report, which, as I said, is available on the IBC website today. If you log in through an IBC 365 account, you can download that particular paper there. But we are just about to move it, so it's much more freely available on our own website, which is ecoflow.tv. And by the time this particular podcast goes out, that will be available for you to download both the full fat product, which is a 35-page plus report, or a much more easy to digest summary of about 7 slides, so that you can dive in as deep as you wish, or just pass through the summary as you wish.
That's amazing. Well, great. Thanks. I'm going to ask you guys the one last question that we're adding to our podcast, which is, what are you watching and what are you reading right now? Who wants to go first?
Oh, I'll do that. Silo. I've just started season 3. And that's a great show about a post-apocalyptic future, which was starting to figure out why. And I think that's interesting. I don't know whether it was actually caused by us or caused by conflict or caused by something else, but it's interesting to see why. But that's an interesting thing, because you've got a group of people in each silo that you'll soon discover, who are living in very much a sustainable life, where they've got only the resources that they've got with them already, and they can't create stuff. They have to recycle, they have to reuse, they have to minimize waste. So that's probably
it's a metaphor for something.
Yeah, it's a metaphor for something. But hey ho, it's getting very interesting in season 3, because we've got some time travel stuff involved, as in we're looking at the past and the future all at the same time. And I'm only 1 episode in. All I know is that it's very noticeable from a video perspective that the scenes in the silo are very dark and broody, and the scenes in the present time, so to speak, are much brighter and airy.
And what are you reading?
Unfortunately, I don't do a lot of fiction reading these days,
or any old reading.
I'm still working my way through again the Lord of the Rings.
So am I. I'm just finishing the Lord of the Rings this week.
Yeah, and it's a lot thicker than the film.
It really is. There's a lot going on there. How many? Yeah. What are you watching and what are you reading?
So I've started watching season 2 of the Airbender series. I don't know if that's something that you're familiar with. So
sure.
Watching the first episode of it yesterday. So yes,
amazing.
Really interesting.
Reading anything?
Leaders Eat Last, Simon Sinek. That's what I'm reading at the moment, which is great parallels, really great information on how to be a leader without necessarily bulldozing your way everywhere.
Nice. Francois?
Yeah, I'm going to be unoriginal, but I'm watching the World Cup mainly, so I haven't actually watched any movie or any series for 2 weeks. Just all my time is going for football.
So you had a lot of late nights.
Busy. Yeah, a lot of late nights, yeah, as late as they can be with young kids at home. And I've got maybe 5 or 6 books at the same time, but the two main ones I'm reading is actually it's not a fiction. It's the story of the first division of Polish tanks during the Second World War, where my great uncle was part of. So I'm rereading a bit his steps through D-Day, which is quite interesting. And then another, the 13 or 21 Rules of Leadership. Great book, have been recommended by my mentor here at Tuxedo. So yeah, good readings.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much, guys. And really looking forward to catching up at IBC, seeing how things are going, and just to see how EcoFlow evolves, which I'm sure it will.